I'd like to get to the president's comments and the global conflicts in just a moment, but I want to start with this speech by Oscar-winning actress Meryl Streep, who spoke passionately about the horrific situation in Afghanistan and the lack of rights for women and girls due to the archaic Taliban laws. Let's just take a listen.
And today, in Kabul, a female cat has more freedoms than a woman. A cat may go sit on her front stoop and feel the sun on her face. She may chase a squirrel into the park. A squirrel has more rights than a girl in Afghanistan today because the public parks have been closed to women and girls by the Taliban.
I mean, it was hard not to listen and take all of that in. Who would that message resonate with?
With women around the world. I mean, it was a very strong message, descriptive, especially, doing a comparative analysis with an animal compared to women's rights. I think she did a really good job using her celebrity power, her celebrity diplomacy to promote a critical issue that is happening under the Taliban rule. So this I would say is just a powerful message overall, and it's calling on the world that we need to address the state of women in Afghanistan, and what do we need to do as far as using our external influences to help address that issue, because it's extremely critical. They're characterizing this issue as the gender apartheid. So where, women in the country alone under Taliban rule is going through a lot of restrictions. So it takes a powerful person like Meryl Streep to address this issue.
Yeah, exactly. She spoke so eloquently. This, of course, is the U.S. President Joe Biden's last UNGA after 5 decades of public service. Interestingly, he says he still has hope. How hard is that to say at a time like this, especially when this crisis in the Middle East is only getting worse?
Yes, I was actually deeply impressed with the UNGA speech, and I would say that with President Biden, he did an excellent job with restoring smart global American leadership by, making sure that, showing that the United States and along with the rest of the world should be committed to the international rule-based order. I thought he also did a really good job in showing a good balancing act, when you're talking about Ukraine, as well as you talk about conflicts in Gaza Gaza crisis, as well as talking about Sudan. So that's really critical to note.
We also heard today from Ukraine's President Zelensky, who spoke about Russia's invasion, calling on nations to act. I just want to roll some of that sound.
Russia can only be forced into peace. And that is exactly what's needed, forcing Russia into peace as the sole aggressor in this war, the sole violator of the UN Charter.
Now, he's going to meet with the U.S. President Biden and Vice President Harris and potentially Donald Trump in the coming days. And we heard Donald Trump trash him while he's in town, while he was at the UN, calling him the greatest salesman. I just want to play some of that sound.
Every time Zelensky comes to the United States, he walks away with $100 billion. I think he's the greatest salesman on earth. But we're stuck in that war unless I'm president. I'll get it done. I'll get it negotiated. I'll get out. We got to get out.
That's what Trump had to say. How is he likely to view another potential Trump term?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I would say, just going back to President Biden, I think he did an excellent job with showing his commitment to Ukraine as far as continuously provide security and economic assistance, and wanted to continue that wanted to show that continuity where he's going to convey the same message to President Zelensky at the White House. Now, with regards to how he views President Trump, a lack of seriousness, not necessarily showing commitment to countering Russian aggression effectively, but feels that he still needs to convey to President Trump that, look, just like what the Biden administration is doing, we need assistance. We need to continue. We need international assistance to continue in order to effectively address Russian aggression in Ukraine. So I think that that's how he, perceives or looks at President Trump.
We'll see if that meeting actually happens between President Zelensky and Donald Trump in the coming days. We will be following closely when he does meet with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Asha Castleberry-Hernandez, good to have you with us. Thanks.